A chant is next from Hawaii, E Malama. We must honor and protect Mother Earth.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. It's really a pleasure and honor to be here today. I have to say, Portland Sings was wonderful. I think we should give them a quick round. You know, we've sort of made a miracle today. We took the Pacific Ocean and we moved it 80 miles to bring it into Portland. And there's a reason for that. We all need the ocean. The ocean needs us. That's part of what we're going to be talking about today. I am Ward Green. I'm the president of SAGE. Now, for those of you who don't know, well, in fact, I'm going to do a little experiment here. How many folks in the audience are over 50? Okay, now that's our sort of SAGE constituent. But today, how many here are under 50? And I want to see that. This is a wonderful crowd. You know, part of what we're trying to do at SAGE, and for those of you who aren't familiar with, SAGE inspires people over 50 to strengthen education, to restore the environment, and to promote economic opportunity, so future generations can thrive. Now, we focus on the seniors because that's who we are, but it's the future generations, the younger folks, the people who raise their hands, they're the ones that we are trying to protect. And I got news for them. One day, they will be seniors. And the responsibility that we share is one that they will take when they reach the senior status. Now, for those of you who don't know, SAGE stands for Senior Advocates for Generational Equity. It seems sort of like a lot of words. My wife said once, why don't you just say we're doing it for the kids? That's an easier way to say it, but that is what we're doing. You know, we have hosted authors, we've put on events throughout Portland and Oregon, all designed to do the same thing. Our proverb, the motto that we live by at Sage, is that a society grows great when its elders plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in. The idea that we're not going to be around to see the consequences of our acts is okay. That's kind of what we're about. There's another kind of a favorite, maybe a Chinese proverb that says, there are 2 times you should plant a tree. Today is one, 20 years ago was the other. Well, we're stuck with planting them today. And so that's what we're encouraging people to do. Now, I am going to comment again about Sage. We're encouraging people to consider becoming members of Sage. We have what we call the free coffee certificate. We have a table up in the mezzanine. We want all of the folks who are interested in addressing what we regard as a moral responsibility to consider what they can do. We refer to it as giving forward. Now, we've got young folks here, we've got old folks here, we've got folks in the middle, but we all share a responsibility. We all share the duty to take care of the next generation. So, sign up for our newsletter, maybe pick up one of the coffee cards. If you give us a call or send us a note on email, we'll be happy to get together. The reality is that every single person in this audience can make a difference. And we actually will make a difference. We'll make choices every day, and it will make a difference. So I encourage all of you to consider becoming members of Sage, to consider becoming part of the movement, to consider making a difference. Now, this is the one everybody's familiar with. Turn off your cell phones or silence them if you haven't already done so. I'm gonna take a minute and go through the people that made this possible. I'm going to ask you to hold your applause, even though it'll be tempting. But let me just go through the list of folks who've been involved. Of course, the fact that we have Dr. Sylvia Earle here is remarkable. She's regarded as the world's leading ocean conservationist. She's made a special trip to be here with us. Without her, the future of the oceans just wouldn't be something we could talk about. Also, yeah, I know, give her a round of applause. Sylvia deserves it. Thank you, Sylvia. This is embarrassing. I lost control of the crowd right away. Okay, you have to wait. The other very active participant, and again, I can't thank them enough, the Oregon Coast Aquarium. They're celebrating their 25th year. They have helped to put this event on, and they've frankly been instrumental in making it happen. Marta and Ken Thrasher are our gold sponsors. They've been terrific. The Standard, Salty Threads, they are silver and bronze sponsors. Our wine at the reception is a fee and the cellar door. They've been terrific. I have to make a special comment about the Oregon Zoo. Now, I don't know if you guys noticed, there's something called Bella, the angelfish, all made of trash. There is an artist and an artist collective called Washed Ashore that collects the stuff that floats in out of the ocean and turns it into art. The zoo has been kind enough to sponsor that exhibit here. Be sure to take a look at it if you didn't when you came in. The zoo is also doing a much bigger exhibit of washed ashore stuff in January. So hats off to the zoo. Thank you very much. Now, here are the education and research partners. Again, we've had a lot of people who are pitching in and are supporting the efforts. We also have our conservation and advocacy partners. I'm not going to read all the names, but if you take a minute and look at them, these are the organizations that are making a difference. And one of the things we tell folks at Sage, we are addressing education, environment, and economic opportunity. But within that very broad ambit of goals that we want to achieve, these organizations are doing the work, and we encourage our members to get involved in these other organizations as well. Our coalitions and collaboratives, again, a lot of organizations that are participating with us and helping. And I'm not going to read all the names, but we have a lot of kids here who did science exhibits. They're winners, and they've done a lot to help promote our goals. So I really appreciate what they've done. And I think Go ahead, let it rip for the kids. I also have to say, I'm sure that you enjoyed the Shibby Shibby She marimba band outside, and of course Sing Portland was up on the stage. So let's hear it now for everyone, and we're gonna.
There's nothing like coming together in harmony when you're all fighting for a cause together. So I'd like you to stand up and sing with me about how much magnificence there is in the ocean. So the first line is, there is so much significance in the ocean. Significance. Great. And you have an undercover choir, because Sing Portland is in the aisles helping you out. Okay, so we'll do it. There is so much magnificence, and there is so much magnificence in the ocean. Waves are coming in, waves are coming in. Waves are coming in, and there is so much magnificence. There is so much magnificence in the ocean. Waves are coming in, waves are coming in. Yeah, you sing the word waves a little bit before the beat. Waves are coming in, waves are coming in. But when I go like this, then you know what to do. Let's do it together. There and there is so much magnificence in the ocean. Waves are coming in, waves are coming in. And again. Magnificence in the ocean. Waves are coming in, waves are coming in. Okay, you sound pretty good, but you sound like, okay, we're doing it. I want you to be excited about what you're singing. Save the oceans with your voice, okay? There's one more, and then the choir's gonna throw in some harmonies. There and much magnificence in the ocean. Waves are coming in, waves are coming in. Sopranos, oh, there is hallelujah. Are there so hallelujah, hallelujah. Tenors and basses, there is so much magnificence. Hallelujah. Again. There is so much magnificence in the ocean. Waves are coming in, waves are coming in. Hallelujah, keep going.
Thanks again. The Portland Sings Choir is wonderful, and Marion Vanamen has made an offer that I think is something you'll be interested in. Those of you who would like to join the choir, she has agreed to give half of all tuitions for anyone who joins the choir to Sylvia Earle's very good organization, Mission Blue. So if listening to these folks sing has inspired you, as it has me, you might want to consider joining. Thank you, Marion. It's a real honor for me now to introduce Bud Lane. Bud is the vice chairman of the Tribes of the Siletz Indians, and Bud is here to give us a blessing on the oceans. Bud is not just the vice chairman, he also teaches native languages, he teaches basket making, he's preserving the arts, ceremonial dance, and the like, and the sanctity and the importance of the oceans to our native peoples can't be overstated. So Bud, would you come up, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I was asked to do a blessing to open this, and I decided that I wanted to share with all of you our people's traditions about how the oceans were made and how everything was created. And I think it's fitting for this type of conference. We all pray for the health of the oceans, but we seem to be not able to get it across to many nations and to many folks about the emergency that we're facing with our oceans that keep us all alive. So I'm going to go through this, and it's an oral history that was handed down to us through the generations, our people at Siletz. So in the beginning, there was nothing. There was only darkness. Three came into existence. Shrina Antina'a Shriyat Yatai, the sender of the generations, daylight and thunder. And these three beings, they existed in the Sheshti, in the sweat house, in the sacred house. And at this time in our sacred house, there was no heat in there was no fire, and it was very cold. And it was said, Shreke Tregintli. They shivered, and their saliva ran down. They were so cold. So one day, the sender of the generations, baby sender, he stood up, and he said to daylight, he said, is there a world to come? And daylight says, yes, there is. So he opened the sweat house door, and daylight filled the void. So now there's a world just full of light. And daylight says, and this is significant because this is when the oceans were first made, he says, let's make the ocean first. And he spat down. And the oceans filled the bottom half of the void. So now we have a horizon, and now we have the first ocean. And so they're looking out this sweat house door, and this is a round circular door of our traditional houses. And now they're floating on the ocean and looking at the horizon. And one says, I see something poking up, something sliding up from the south of here, and I don't know what it is. And baby sender says, it's land for the people. That's where we're going to put the people at. So the land began to pile up in this ocean, in this water, and it began piling up into all the mountains and all the coastline and all the land in the world that we know. And these beings, they set about populating the earth and the ocean with all of the beings and the plants and the seaweeds and the fishes, every mammal, every insect, everything you can think of. They kept creating and making all of these things. And finally, once they've laid everything out and all the trees are there, all the fish in every river and every lake and every stream and all through the ocean, the clams, all of the mammals, everything is laid out and made perfectly. They said, well, what do we do now? And Baby Center said, now we're going to make a person. So they created this woman, and in our language, she's known as Shankat, which is extreme female beauty. She was just a knockout. And Daylight thinks she is so beautiful, he decides to marry her. So he marries this woman, and they have 16 children. And they became our ancestors. And so that's how the world was made and put together, how the ocean was first made, and how our people came to be, and how it was all laid out for us. So that intersection that we have today between the ocean and the land is where our people still historically got sustenance, and where we still rely on those, the fish and the animals and the seaweed and the clams and the mussels for our food. So it's a very sacred thing for us, and our oral history tells us exactly how the Creator and the companions put it together for us to live on. So if you will join me in a short prayer. Quatlesham Aishnan Huitayam te wange nachua Tlacha te sinteth Nanhuchan what di tlestlat Nanhuchan what di sinscha one chawityam Huitai shoot no sintla shoot no ninla. Creator of all things, we stand before you again. We ask for your blessing on this gathering. We also ask that you help us and help us take care of our world and our oceans. All good things you have placed here for us, and we thank you for it. Amen. Thank you very much.
It's now my pleasure and honor to introduce Kerry Lewis to you. Kerry has been involved with the aquarium for almost 25 years. When you see her, she looks so young, it seems impossible. She's been the president of the aquarium now for almost 10 years. And in that capacity, she basically does everything and has done a wonderful job coordinating this event with us. Now, I know that Kerry is passionate about the ocean, grew up in Hawaii, and was even a competitive ocean swimmer for many years. And she's going to introduce our featured speaker. Kerry, come on up.
I don't know how you found out all that information about me, but hello, everyone. It has been an honor to partner with SAGE to raise awareness about the future of our oceans. This is an honor for the aquarium. The leaders who founded the Oregon Coast Aquarium were mindful of our future generations when they envisioned a place that would draw tourism, facilitate oceanic research, and bring economic prosperity to the community. The aquarium is perfectly situated on the Oregon coast to attract visitors. We have welcomed over 15 million visitors from around the world since we opened our doors in 1992. Our tourism alone draws over $100 million to the Lincoln County every year. But the aquarium is much more than a tourist destination. We are a living classroom. We play a significant role in scientific inquiry and exploration. The rising seas, changing climate, and compromised ecosystems all point to a vital need for the next generation to better understand, connect with, and care for our oceans. Our education programs help make those connections and understand the ripple effect of human decisions on the ecosystems in which they live. We are giving teachers the resources they need to incorporate marine science into student curriculum. We created Oceanscape Network, a distance learning site to bridge the digital divide so teachers have a trusted resource for marine content. We partner with higher education to give interns and practicum students real-world experiences and inspire young people to consider marine science careers. When schools can't come to the aquarium, we go to them. We present to thousands and thousands of elementary school children in remote and low-income schools in 5 states. But we know the aquarium needs to evolve if it's going to bring about transformational, progressive, yet sustainable evolution in thinking about the ocean. Leading up to our 25th anniversary, the aquarium worked on a strategic plan to set a course for change. We refined a myriad of ideas into 5 programmatic and capital projects that we believe will deliver memorable experiences, yet retain our sense of place on the Pacific Ocean. We are in the early stage of a capital campaign. Over the next 5 years, we plan to remodel our entryway with a new exhibit featuring moon jellies that will greet guests when they walk through our doors. We're creating a children's nature play area, which will transform the former mill site with components that encourage families to get off their phones and explore the wonders of the forest. Our 3 core galleries will be enhanced with larger, more accessible touch pools, a new gallery showcasing jellies, and a Pacific Rim exhibit that extends the narrative from the ocean shoreline to ocean depths. A new marine wildlife rehabilitation center will replace old warehouse facilities where we currently provide critical care for injured seabirds, abandoned seal pups, and hypothermic sea turtles who are off migration. You may not know that we are only one of 3 facilities in the Pacific Northwest, and the only one in Oregon, certified to provide critical care to injured marine mammals who strand on our beaches. That gets me. I'm so proud of that. If you haven't already, take a look at the designs that we've displayed around the arena. We've already raised $6 million of our $18 million campaign goal, all for the purpose of creating unique and engaging experiences that connect you to the Oregon coast and inspire ocean conservation. The ocean is a major force on this planet, home to over 1 million known species of plants and animals, producer of half of the world's oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere, sustainer of natural resources, and a regulator of the world's climate. Dr. Sylvia Earle has said, "With every drop of water you drink, every breath you take, you are connected to the ocean." Those that work in our field have a common denominator, and that's passion. From the aquarists that work at the aquarium and dive with our sharks, to the researchers that span our vast oceans, we are all here to make a difference. We have to thank pioneers like Dr. Earle for her commitment and passion, which is paving the way for the next generation of passionate and committed marine biologists right there. Dr. Sylvia Earle is an explorer in residence at the National Geographic Society, founder of Mission Blue, founder of Deep Ocean Exploration and Research, and former chief scientist of NOAA. She has received 27 honorary doctorates, has authored more than 200 publications, and has led more than 100 expeditions with over 7,000 hours underwater. She is the oceanographer featured in the Emmy Award-winning Netflix documentary, Mission Blue. Here to speak about the state of our oceans and how we can be all a part to save it, Her Deepness, the Sturgeon General, Dr. Sylvia Earle.
Thank you.
Thank you. It is an honor.
Thank you. Thank you. What a great Portland welcome. Whew. When the choir was singing, I thought I heard a response from way out there in the ocean, something like, whoop, whoop, oh. The whales singing in harmony. Jane Goodall often starts her talks with the sounds of a chimpanzee, so it's appropriate that we start this one with a bit of a sound from the sea. Thank you for inviting me here. Thank you, Sage, for your sageness. What a concept. I tell kids that rather than be despondent about the state of the world, to really be glad that you have arrived at a point in time when, as never before, we are empowered with knowledge that could not exist before. That those who have preceded you, all of us, have paved the way. Now we come armed with not just language, music, numbers, knowledge about how to create what it is that gives us the benefits that we take for granted, more or less, the clothes we wear, the technology that we use. But what we have is an understanding that our predecessors could not have, and that is, as never before, some insight about what we heard from our speaker talking about the native origin of who are we, where have we come from, and maybe most importantly, where are we going? So when I was a kid, no one had seen Earth from space. When I was a kid, think of all the things that we didn't know, that we now know, that you know. You have the gift of knowledge. You have superpowers, you kids coming along, that I did not have when I was a kid. No one had it. And it's a good thing, because we need all the knowledge, all the insight, all the appreciation for how we got to where we are and how we can get from here to the next place, and hope that we can secure an enduring place for ourselves within the systems that keep us alive. I think through all of our history, up until right about now, we have done what every other living thing on Earth does. You use the natural environment to foster your particular brand of prosperity. Trees do it. They use the nutrients in the soil. They use space. Birds do it. They take bits of the trees to make their nests. They eat their neighbors, the insects, and so on. All creatures use the natural world, but no creature has consumed so much, so fast, of the natural ingredients that make Earth unique in the universe as we have. And if we didn't have the knowledge that now empowers all of us, we would probably keep on doing the same old thing on and on until we did ourselves in, until we ate ourselves or consumed ourselves out of the capacity of the planet to keep us alive. Well, we are almost there with 7 billion people, 7 billion appetites, 7 billion, whatever it is that each of us requires for sustenance and space and all that. But the great thing is we have 7 billion minds now alerted to something that we could not see before. So let me dive in with you. When I was a child, many years ago, this is where I lived, in Dunedin, Florida. Did not have television, but I did have books, including a book by William Beebe, who talked about diving into the ocean as much as half a mile down. Look at what he's doing. In the late 1920s, early 1930s, before I arrived, William Beebe and Otis Barton, his engineer buddy, contrived the system. Would you do this? I would. Where's your spirit of adventure anyway? To be able to go half a mile beneath the surface. They were the first to glimpse creatures that, until that time, no one had seen life in the deep sea. That's not exactly deep, it's only half a mile down, and the maximum depth of the ocean is 7 miles, so, still in the 1930s. And then along came Cousteau with scuba, which has empowered literally millions of people to at least take the plunge, breathe underwater down to a depth of 50 meters or so, sometimes not that much, but we now see and know things that we could not know before very recent times. So here in Portland, Oregon, you can sometimes look up and see the Milky Way. You can see the stars. I've lived in some places and visited many other places where, you think something's wrong if you see stars. Where did they come from? Because Los Angeles, for example, it's a miraculous day when the mist and other things part and you can see where we are in the universe. We have a unique space here on Earth. Some have likened our planet to a spacecraft with all of us as passengers and crew on board. Those stars, those planets, those suns beyond where we are beautiful, but really not very hospitable. Just try setting up housekeeping on Mars. Some people are trying to do that, but good luck. I have my list of those I would like to see set up housekeeping on Mars. But it's okay, go. But now we know what was not possible to know before. About half a century ago, it was actually 1968, when the young astronaut Bill Anders, who lives not too far from here, he's moved to Washington State, and he loves looking up to see the stars at night. I had a chance to visit with him recently. He took this photograph. He convinced NASA that it was important to take a long lens on board. They resisted, but he persisted and got this amazing image and a whole host of others, but this, called Earthrise, taken on Christmas Eve in 1968, transformed the way we think about ourselves. It really was one of those historic moments. Some say the most important photograph ever taken, because it did stop us in our tracks from this trajectory of taking, and then realizing that's all there is. That's it. Whatever we cherish about our past, whatever we hope for in the future, whatever we're doing right now, there it is, on this little blue speck in the universe. There is no away. There is no more. Well, maybe some of the miners now that are proposing to go up and snatch minerals from meteorites will succeed, but it's still kind of within our solar system, within our circle. We have taken so much for granted, and we have, and we still do. But when people ask me sometimes, so why should I care about the ocean? If it dried up tomorrow, what difference would it make to me? Because this person who asked that question really did some years ago. She said, I don't drink salt water. Nobody drinks salt water. I don't swim. I get seasick. I don't like to eat fish. So if the ocean goes away, what difference would it make? Well, okay, look at the red planet. No wonderful ocean filled with life there. And the atmosphere is mostly carbon dioxide, the way Earth's early atmosphere was. But life on this planet changed everything. Photosynthesis in particular, that magic chemistry that took carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and still doing it every day. Grabbing carbon dioxide, generating food, releasing oxygen into the atmosphere. It's a miracle that it happened, and it's the basis of our existence. Imagine if it didn't. So, if you were an alien force out there saying, God, we got to get rid of those people. Let's convince them to change the planet in ways that will make life inhospitable for them. So what would you ask them to do? You'd say, change the temperature, change the temperature, change the chemistry and kill the wildlife. There, you've got it. You've got Mars, or something like Mars. We have benefited greatly from burning fossil fuels, but there's been a cost that we're just now beginning to pay for, to understand. The benefit is that now we can see what we couldn't see before. It was fossil fuels that took William Anders high in the sky and looked back. It's fossil fuels that have given us so many benefits. The food we eat are powered by fossil fuels and fertilizers that we get from the petrochemicals, the medicines that have been, the plastics that are not all bad, pretty bad, but they've benefited us very well. But knowledge, now we know so much that we could not know when I was a child. Now we know we have to change. We're burning the planet with our fossil fuel consumption, flying over just to come here, going anywhere at night. When you're high in the sky, you look out and it looks as though the world is on fire, and in fact it is. We're burning fossil fuels, fossil plants, fossil microbes, whatever, to power our existence. And so we're changing the chemistry, changing the temperature. We have the evidence that we didn't have when I was a kid, but now it's all around us. So those of you, all of us, it's right there for us to see. Bad news for polar bears, but bad news for us too. Sea level rise. More than that, excess carbon dioxide, not just in the atmosphere, along with methane warming the planet, excess carbon dioxide acidifying the ocean, powering storms of greater magnitude and frequency. We're paying the price. It's weather, climate disruption, greater waves of too much water, too little water in places that are new. The ocean, creatures that we've only begun to get to know in the 20th century, seriously, that is by getting out in the midst of coral reefs, and now we're seeing them change. About half the coral reefs since I was a kid have disappeared, or they're in a serious state of decline. Coral bleaching brought about largely because of the changing temperature, the warming ocean. Change the chemistry of the ocean. Yes, there's one thing we are doing through acidification, but also we dump our stuff, our junk out into the ocean. We dump our sewage into the sea. We had the impression this ocean is so big, so vast, that we can't change the ocean, except now we know. We are changing the ocean. Around the world, owing to all of the fertilizers that we put on our agriculture, good news, we learned how to make plants grow faster and produce more, only we hadn't thought it through. But now we can see what we could not see when we started industrial farming. It's not that we were trying to do things to harm the earth, harm our future, but now we can understand, look, there are limits. Knowing is the key. If we didn't know, we'd keep on doing the same stupid things that have gotten us to this perilous place. But armed with knowledge, we can figure this out. We know how to make things that we love to use, like plastic bags and cups and styrofoam and all that stuff. And it was such a great benefit, such good news in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, only now look at the ocean, look at the rivers that are clogged with our debris. You know, now we know. Now we can see what we could not see before. We can see what the fish see. I mean, this is 300 miles offshore from Costa Rica in a national park, in Cocos Islands National Park. Well, the fish didn't put that stuff there. It came from largely coming in from the shore. And of course, from those who are out at sea who dumped their trash overboard. It seemed at the time over recent decades that this is what we should do to get rid of things, right? Throw it into the ocean. Only the ocean is tossing it back, and it's coming back increasingly in tiny little bits that the oysters eat, that the clams eat, that the whales eat, that the fish eat, that all the creatures in the sea, whether they like it or not, are engulfing the residue of what we've been putting into the ocean. Not very tasty. And the nets that are the origin of some of this plastic debris, some of them continue fishing and killing creatures, even though that wasn't the intent when the fishermen put the nets over the side or lost them or discarded them, because now nets are made of lightweight, easily expendable plastics that are inexpensive compared to the finely made nets of centuries ago, or even in the first part of the 20th century. So killing the wildlife. We've done a pretty good job of doing this throughout the land. We have taken on a special focus of the large predators. When Lewis and Clark came to the Great Northwest across the country early in the 1800s, their mission in part was to skin the animals, to take their hides back to, again, foster the desires of people who did not know these animals alive. They just knew how beautiful their fur was. What is it about creatures with big teeth that we fear them, that we go out of our way to eliminate them? We've done a pretty good job of eliminating so much of the wildlife. Maybe you have heard about the concern expressed just this past week about the loss of biodiversity. That means not just the individual species, but coral reefs, marshes, seagrass meadows, old growth forests, ecosystems. That's biodiversity too. The little guys that live in the soil, the little guys that live in the ocean, all sum up to be our neighbors, the network of life that keeps us alive. But now that we know the value of panthers and crocodiles and great white sharks, I know people ask me sometimes, aren't you afraid to go in the ocean? It's those sharks, aren't they going to get you? And that's what I thought when I first started diving. Man-eaters are out there, I was told, and then I realized, oh, I don't have to worry. I don't qualify. It's just the guys have to worry. Well, actually, none of us have to worry. The sharks have to worry, because it's man-eating sharks that now is the real problem. 90% of the big sharks are gone, and most of the little ones are in serious trouble too. Why? Because we've developed a market for them, mostly in recent times. When I began to explore the ocean in the 1950s, the ocean was a pretty sharky place, but we've managed to do in about 90% of them, along with a lot of the other big fish and other creatures in the sea. It's horrendous how good we are at extracting wildlife out of the ocean, not to feed native communities or families or coastal people. It's largely now to feed luxury tastes, an industrial market for wildlife that is simply not sustainable, no matter how you crunch the numbers. When you get down to the fraction that now exists of many of the big fish in the sea, every fish counts, every shark counts. We shouldn't allow any of them to be deprived of their fins so that some could have the delicious taste of, it's not so delicious actually, of shark fin soup. It doesn't taste like much of anything. I mean, I've tried it, just to say I've tried it, and yeah, I mean, you ought to be able to forego shark fin soup, for heaven's sakes. The sharks need their fins, we don't. But it's been the reason why a great market has been created just in the recent decades. Tunas, when I was a kid, were largely safe. A few were taken, mostly island nations, coastal communities. But you couldn't get a tuna fish in Chicago. When I was a child, shipping fish over long distances has been now facilitated by refrigeration. You can take some fish caught in the Atlantic and it winds up in Japan the next day, the same day, in some cases. And it is not about feeding people other than feeding that taste that you acquire. There are plenty of things that humans can eat, and already we do. Most of what we do consume comes from plants, corn, rice, wheat, soy. About 80% of the calories come from those 4 categories of plants alone, and the other 20% from all the animals we raise, plus all those other plants we raise, plus what we take from the wild. And it's hard to justify, except in coastal communities, in places where there is a long history of respecting nature and reliance on wildlife, to take so much out of the ocean so fast that we bring about a decline up to as much as 90%. Sometimes just for the fun of it. Let's go catch a tuna. Let's get a trophy to put on the wall. We are now facing this great time of loss. It's a perilous time to be a swordfish or a tuna. The greatest predator on earth has arrived. That would be us, and we have technology now on our side to tip the scales so that we can take on a scale that has never been possible before the middle of the 20th century and now on into the 21st. Tuna fleets deploying these huge nets in the Indian Ocean, the Atlantic, and Pacific, taking, again, on a scale, when you think about it, how could this possibly be sustainable? We don't even know what was there to start with. But we're taking because it's there and we are able to take it, find a market for it, create a market for wildlife from the sea, even for the little guys. Krill, partly from the Arctic, mostly from the Antarctic. Wouldn't you think that we could leave these little guys alone? They are the powerhouse, the middlemen that take phytoplankton, the little tiny organisms that do the heavy lifting in terms of capturing carbon, generating oxygen, powering the great ocean food webs, and then including powering krill and other zooplankton that are consumed by everybody in Antarctica. You'd think the penguins eat krill, the whales eat krill, the seals eat krill. There's a kind called the crab-eater seal. They're not eating crabs, they're eating krill, relatives of crabs. Anyway, so take the krill out of the equator and out of the equation, and who suffers? Just about every creature who lives there, including the krill, of course. And think about the carbon cycle, the oxygen cycle. Every little creature, every big creature too, every whale, every bit of phytoplankton or zooplankton, whatever it is, they take in nutrients, but they give back to the ocean nutrients that power the phytoplankton. It's like a big circle that goes round and round. It happens on your garden. You know, you fertilize with what has come mostly from, well, now it's from chemicals, but historically it's been from animals, even from us. Now we're finding new ways to take on the ocean. I just came last week from a conference about deep sea mining that was all the rage in the 1980s when we really thought that taking minerals from the deep sea would be the next big blue wave of fostering economic prosperity. And then it died down because the reality struck of how difficult it is to work in 20,000 feet of water. Very few people, anybody in this room ever been to 20,000 feet under the sea? I haven't been there yet. I've been 12,000 feet under the sea, but twice as deep. To get down to extract the manganese nodules and the life in the sea that is associated with hydrothermal vents, whose existence we didn't know about until the late 1970s, but now they're the source, the target of deep sea mining, using these big machines to crawl across the ocean floor and take the minerals. I mean, mining can be done in ways that are more or less damaging, but when you can't see what's going on, how are you going to monitor the damage? But it's happening, or not, depending on what we do or fail to do. What gives me hope right now is we've got eyes on what's happening. We have evidence of what happens when we go too far. There was evidence that we could, if we chose to, late in the 20th century, take the last great whale. Oh, we had the power to do so. We got right down to very low numbers of gray whales here on the west coast of North America. They used to be on the east coast as well, but they're all gone there. But something happened in the 20th century. People began to look at whales with another way. You know, yes, pounds of meat, barrels of oil, that you could sell a whale for money, but you wouldn't have the whale anymore as a part of the ecosystem. I mean, I've been to whaling stations. I've seen what a whale can be turned into. But we stopped killing whales commercially, for the most part. A few nations still do take whales, not for need, but for products. And we don't have to go to the museums to see what remains of whales that were around early in the 20th century. I mean, we could be here right now saying you have to go to a museum to see what a whale was like, or at least you can see the bones. We did in the dodo. They talk about being dead as a dodo. Well, they're gone. They've been gone for 1,000 years, but we did it. We humans ate the last one. It's like a big pigeon, a big juicy pigeon. And in Mauritius, a little island nation, they were able in a very short period of time, people who lived there just turned them all into breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Then they were gone. So we could do it with whales, but we chose not to. We have the power of choice. Armed with knowledge that did not exist before right about now, we all have that superpower of knowing. Yay! Hoo-hoo! So feel the power. We can choose. What kind of an ocean do we want? What kind of a planet do we want? What kind of future do we want? It's up to us, it's up to you, all of us, right now. Climate scientists say we've got about 10 years to go from what we perceive, and it's not just climate, it's biodiversity loss, it's acidification of the ocean, it's changing chemistry, loss of wildlife, the three big things: change the temperature, change the chemistry, kill the wildlife. Here's how it's going. But it's not too late. We can still breathe, right? You can still go to a restaurant and see a lot of wildlife on the menu, too much wildlife on the menu, actually. These mighty fish that are slowly or rapidly becoming history. We can make a different choice. We can be part of the turning point. We have the power to do this. And I see it happening. And you know where it starts? It starts with understanding. I think about that woman who asked me, why should I care about the ocean? And I say, well, do you like to breathe? And where does air come from? As a kid, I didn't even think about it. I mean, air was just air. It was here. And the thought that air has weight, that we're sitting under the weight of the atmosphere with 14.7 pounds per square inch. That's the weight of the air on all of us. You can feel it when you're in a car and you put your hand out the window. You can feel the resistance. It's not like what an astronaut experiences up in where there is no air, where there is no weight. So, the power of plants. I'm so glad photosynthesis happened. You should be too. It's that process that we haven't figured out how to do it ourselves. Maybe some bright chemists will crack the code and be able to replicate what plants do naturally. Capture carbon, generate oxygen, fix sugar that becomes the basis of all the food. And we have the power of protecting our life support system, the plants, the water, the air. And until 1986, the same year that we kind of stopped killing whales commercially, there was a young woman at MIT, Penny Chisholm, who with her colleagues used a new method for sampling the ocean and discovered, ta-da, Prochlorococcus. You never heard of Prochlorococcus? Well, a big chunk of the oxygen in the atmosphere is generated by these tiny little microbes that are so small that they had escaped our notice until 1986. The notice of Penny Chisholm and her colleagues, who then began looking around. They were working off Bermuda in clear ocean water. You pick up a glass of water near Bermuda in the Sargasso Sea, it looks like, well, some would say like gin, like vodka. I say like clear spring water. But it's loaded with life, so small that you need a mighty power of the kind of microscopic viewing and chemical sorting that we didn't have until late in the 20th century. But now we know these little guys do much of the heavy lifting, along with diatoms that we have known about for some time, and other phytoplankton in the sea, the engine that drives the zooplankton, a zoo of creatures, a cross-section of life on Earth in many ways. In that image, if you really looked very closely, you could see probably 15 or so phyla of animals. That's about as many phyla of animals that occur in all of the land and all of the freshwater combined. The ocean is the great motherland, motherlode of biodiversity. And you think about the big wedges of life, jellyfish, the larval starfish, the arrowworms, the flatworms, the polychaete worms that are in that plankton as larval stages or as grown-ups, baby fish, young sponges, young sea urchins, the whole suite of life. Largely, the young are out there like a nursery in that soup in the ocean, powered by phytoplankton. Little guys of all sorts, baby comb jellies, young echinoderms, baby fish, you name it. They in turn are munched on by bigger fish, bigger creatures, and in turn munched on by even bigger creatures, And so you get in the middle of a great ocean food web, being careful not to become part of the great ocean food web. You can see this. This is the energy being passed from right through the food chain, and it's a nutrient cycle. And what is being split off and into the ocean, both in terms of little bits and pieces that power the phytoplankton, it's also, well, you know what whales do and sharks do. They poop. They put nutrients back. And the cycle goes on and around, on and around. And we have broken those cycles because we've developed this insatiable appetite for ocean wildlife, thinking the ocean is too big to fail. We can take what we want, as much as we want, as long as we want. But I'm a scientist, and you can do what scientists do too. Observe carefully. Report honestly what you see. Look at the evidence. Anybody can do that. Everyone should do that. Just look at the evidence. And then think twice before you bite into the next tuna fish sandwich. Or think about having orange roughy. These creatures who were really on the state of sharp decline before enough evidence was gathered to realize they take about 25 years to mature. They live in the deep sea. We couldn't get to them until fairly recently when we had the technology to go get them in the deep ocean and market them anywhere in the world. Orange roughy. It may be in the markets here in Portland now. It's kind of disappeared from the markets in Oakland, California, or where I keep looking in Florida, Washington, D.C., New York. There was this great, like a gold rush for a while, taking, and while there were a lot of them, but because these were untouched, heretofore humans could never get down to where orange roughy live. And when they started taking them, they took them all, or almost all, I mean, there's still some out there, but now we know they can live to be 100, 150 years old. The oldest one that I've heard about is more than 200 years old. They age them by looking at the ear bones that fish have and counting the rings like the rings on a tree. And it's no wonder that we've so quickly mined them out of the ocean, because they don't come back overnight. And they've left a hole in the ocean where they've been taken, like an old growth tree. It takes a long time to recover. So, I just brought a few fish here to let them speak for themselves, if you will. I've had the pleasure of getting to know fish the way, not quite the way Jane Goodall has gotten to know chimpanzees. You know, she has the luxury of being able to stay in their midst and just sit there for hours and hours, day and night, to get to look at their faces, realize their personality, see their social behavior, and to convince us that they are really cool dudes, those chimpanzees. We ought not to be just casually watching them go into extinction. We should respect them. Oh yes, and they are, by the way, our closest relatives. But fish are our relatives too. They're our fellow vertebrates. They were here like hundreds of millions of years before the present time. Long before dinosaurs, there were fish in the sea figuring out these relationships, these partnerships. If you've seen the BBC's Blue Planet 2, or if you haven't, please check it out, you'll see partnerships between grouper and octopus. They go fishing together, or a grouper and a moray eel. They signal each other and then go off into the blue to go hunting and sharing lunch. Anyway, imagine that fish can do these things. Imagine that fish have faces. Oh, they do. Every one is distinct as what I'm looking out upon here. I suppose if a fish came swimming through, they'd say, oh, people, they all look alike, you know? We do, kind of. But when you think, look at the biggest fish in the ocean, big enough for us to really see the difference. No two whale sharks have the same arrangement of spots. They're so distinctive that you can go, and I've done this, with a camera, take a photograph, send it in to Whale Shark Central, where they have a computer arrangement to figure out which whale shark you've just taken a picture of, because the spots are all different. And they've got a catalog. They're using now facial recognition or spot recognition technology to see who's who among the whale sharks and tracking their travels. So when I first had a chance to live underwater, again, not like Jane Goodall for weeks and months and years, but at least for a couple of weeks to spend the night and day after day, in a place, getting to see individual fish, getting to know that moray eel that lived in that place, and to see how curious they turn out to be about us. You know, it's like bird watchers go out to see the birds, and I thought going into the ocean I could be a fish watcher, and then I found out the fish are watching me. It's kind of disconcerting, but it's true. They haven't seen the likes of us. Birds have seen humans throughout our history, but fish, not so much. It's only recently that we've entered their realm as more than predators, to go as observers, as whatever, to go see that even the starfish no two exactly alike. Shrimp, who could imagine that on your shrimp cocktail you're eating individuals with characteristics that set each one of them apart? But that's one of the great miracles of biology, of life, that there are no two of anything that are exactly alike. They might superficially appear that way, but if you get down to the DNA and the microbes that live within them, whether it's a shrimp or a dog or a cat or a horse or a cow or a human, we're all really special. And so are these little creatures out there in the sea. We are just beginning to acknowledge the great diversity I mean, we know species, we know families, we know phyla and all that, but to know that every individual not only is its own self, but that we all have a common chemistry, right down to the bacteria. Even that kingdom of life that was discovered late in the 70s, called the archaea, that are so different from bacteria, different from bacteria, although they superficially look alike. Little blobs in the ocean, or in the digestive tracts of lots of things, including us. The archaea are, even though they look like bacteria, they're in a different kingdom. They've been chemically shown to have a genome that is very different, and yet the chemistry that we all share is the chemistry of life. And we should be thrilled to know that. Could not know that when I was a child, how we are all connected, and that what we do to any part of it, we are really doing to ourselves. Biodiversity, that's just a little piece of a little chunk of reef in South Africa. A casual photograph that I snapped while diving, maybe 30 feet down. Coral reefs everywhere are noted for their diversity. In a place you can embrace with your arms, you might find as many as a dozen or 15 phyla, these big categories of life. Now we can see it. That's the great good news. We have the power to jump in. If you have not taken the plunge yourself yet, do yourself a favor. Figure it out. Get a mask. Get a snorkel. Get flippers. Make a start. If you haven't snorkeled, go for it somewhere. It's a little chilly along the coast of Oregon. Ugh. But get a wetsuit. Or go to Hawaii, or go to Baja California. But don't let life slip by without taking the plunge. And some people are put off by the idea of the technology involved with scuba. My mom waited until she was 81, and if she were here, she'd say, don't wait until you're 81, but if you are, don't wait any longer. And it's not that difficult. You know, just do it. I remember the first time that I jumped in, and I couldn't believe that I could actually breathe underwater, but then I could. And I only had 2 words of instruction: breathe naturally. And I did, and I'm still here. Now, many years later, I have had the pleasure of staying underwater day and night, not just for days, but weeks at a time. I've done it 10 times now in variations on the theme of underwater laboratories. It is so cool. I just wish they were all over the place. Right now, I only know of 2, and they're both in the Florida Keys, where as a scientist or as a student, you can get access to the Aquarius and stay for a week or so underwater. The Florida Institute of Technology now operates it. It used to be operated by NOAA. And nearby, there's an underwater hotel. It used to be used by scientists. Both of them are in the Key Largo area. But whatever it is, snorkel, dive, fancy equipment that now exists that didn't exist not so long ago. I was able, using that helmet, to be able to talk to people on the surface half a world away, because we're now connected from underwater to wherever you want to talk to. But our bodies are not really able to withstand pressure below about 1,000 feet, and even going to 1,000 feet is a pretty big deal. 100 feet is a pretty big deal for most people. So wrap yourself in a protective shell. Get into a submarine. If you really want to go deep or stay long, that's the key. And when I had a chance, when I was doing a project for the National Geographic, Oceaneering International let me borrow the gym suit named after the first person willing to put it on back in the 1920s. It is so cool to be able to walk around on the ocean floor 1,000 feet or more below the surface, and you don't feel the pressure. You're breathing air at the same atmospheric pressure we have here in this room. And it inspired me to work with engineers the way William Beebe back in the 20s and 30s worked with Otis Spartan to design, develop, and produce something so simple that even a scientist can drive it. And I'm living proof of being able to get into a clear sphere, go down a half a mile beneath the surface, 1,000 meters, and sit there. I spent the night in this submarine off the coast of Mexico, off Veracruz, on a coral reef. It was only 100 feet, but I could not stay at 100 feet breathing compressed air without a lot of decompression. Here, you just sit there and wearing blue jeans and a t-shirt or whatever. I'm so pleased to see we are coming along like the early days of aviation when anybody in this room can fly. Most of you, probably all of you, have flown somewhere, sometime. And we take it for granted. We go 7 miles in the sky, eating lunch, watching movies, taking a nap, doing whatever. Really, it's become commonplace. Why aren't we doing that in the ocean? Why is it so hard to get 1,000 feet? 1,000 feet is no distance at all. You can look in any direction and say, why can't we just go down there? Well, it is happening. This is the Gulf of Mexico, part of the BBC program. And I, for 5 years, when I, as a National Geographic Explorer in residence, managed to get the funding to lease little submarines, one-person submarines, that we had a teacher, the president of the National Geographic, scientists. We had a program going that took students out to see the ocean from the inside out. And it's coming. We're not exactly at Hertz Renaissance stage yet, but I'm determined, if I have anything to say about it, that we will have a new generation of little subs, so simple to drive that anybody can do it. Or if you really don't want to drive, you can get a taxi driver, somebody who's experienced, and 2 passengers, go off into the ocean, but anybody can take the controls. So you don't have to wait and tell somebody else to go left or right. You can do this. And the company that I started, my daughter and son-in-law now own and operate, building these little submarines and remotely operated systems to be able to explore the ocean in ways that William Beebe would be so pleased to see a clear submarine instead of a tiny little porthole that he had to peer out of. All right. So, why am I an incurable optimist? Because if you give in to despair, it's over. And there are plenty of reasons for hope. The most important one is now we know. And we can see, we can learn from the past, and we can look to the future and take action now that will make all the difference in the world for what remains of whatever time any of us have, but to secure an enduring future for everything we care about. Our history, our kids, our great-great-great-great-grandkids, whatever. I met this bird, named by the people who know her well, Wisdom. She lives halfway across the Pacific Ocean on a little island called Midway, the site of Great War activities, World War II, but now peaceful, and a nesting site for gazillions of seabirds, including Wisdom, who is a Laysan albatross. Turns out she was banded and is known to have begun flying in the 1950s, about the same time I was learning how to dive. So I can relate to this bird. She's here sitting on her latest egg. She and her lifetime mate lay, well, she does the laying. They both do the caring. But about, not every year, but when they do, it's one egg. Really put a lot of investment into that egg, that young chick. In her lifetime, she has seen, as I have in mine, changes. But flying over the Pacific as she does, searching for squid and small fish to bring back to her hungry chick, taking turns with her spouse who lets her rest while he goes out and fishes and brings back food for the young chick and for themselves. But now, there are fewer squid, there are fewer little fish, and a lot more of this stuff that we have put into the ocean, plastics, and the young birds are getting stuffed with cigarette lighters and toothbrushes and little toys and bottle caps, all kinds of things, and many of them never get to fly because they get so stuffed with plastic that they starve to death, never even spread their wings. She has miraculously survived, along with some of the other adult birds who, when they're grown up, they can get rid of the plastic that they ingest. The babies cannot do that. Okay, she has seen things I have not, but I have witnessed the changes as well. Fewer fish, fewer squid, lots more plastic. But I know why those things are happening. She doesn't know, and even if she did know the cause, she couldn't do anything about it. We can, I can, you can, we all can make a difference through decisions we make to keep that avalanche of junk out of the ocean, to turn the chemistry of the ocean back to something more as it was early in the 20th century, to work with our leaders to say we need to have in the ocean something equivalent to that, what some say is the greatest idea America ever had, parks on the land, to respect areas that are still in pretty good shape, where we have some old growth trees, where we have wildlife, nesting places for birds, safe havens for animals, safe havens for us. So it was actually an idea that started in the 1970s with the National Marine Sanctuary Program. But President George W. Bush scaled things up. I think it was Laura Bush who whispered into his ear how important it was to take care, not just of the land. Laura Bush is a great fan of national parks, but the ocean. She went to Midway. She saw Wisdom, the albatross. She saw all that plastic stuff on the beaches and was inspired to help influence, at the time, the most powerful person in the world, president of this country, to take action because he could. I had a chance to share around a little table dinner with George W. Bush, which is why I'm in that picture there with Laura, and the discussion about protecting the Midway Island area, the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, known locally as the Papahānaumokuākea Marine Monument, now the Marine Monument, because he used his presidential power to sign into law the largest marine protected area at the time on the planet. Pooh-hoo, what a concept. Who would think that George W. Bush would do that, but he did. And along in 2016 came President Obama, who quadrupled the size of the Papahānaumokuākea Marine Reserve and took action for other places, as did George W. Bush during his latter part of their respective administrations, like a passing gift, a parting shot. Okay, giving back. So I remember myself saying to President Bush, given a chance to sit down with him quite by chance, knowing he loves to go fishing, pointing out that if there are to be fishermen, there have to be fish. Like, duh. He did not know that 90% of many of the big fish were already gone. I mean, he had wars and the economy and things to think about, but I had been thinking about it, and those of us around the table were able to share that knowledge with him. And to say that, like Ducks Unlimited, did a great deal to protect birds, safe havens for birds that people like to take home for dinner once in a while, the ducks, the geese, the other wild birds. And it worked. You know, by protecting special areas, you can see recovery happen. And soon thereafter, also in 2016, nations around the world got together and upped the ante by protecting the even greater part of the ocean around Antarctica. protecting the krill, the base of the food chain. And, you know, who knows? That was only 2016, but it is likely that that gesture will have impact. Of course, that's part of the high seas. What are the high seas? The part of the ocean beyond national jurisdiction. What is the area beyond national jurisdiction? Well, about the same time Penny Chisholm was discovering Prochlorococcus, about the same time that we stopped killing whales, nations around the world started claiming out 200 miles the exclusive economic zone. So this country, if you include that area out in the ocean, has suddenly doubled in size. Australia has doubled in size. And around the world, little island nations have really grown in size in terms of areas under their jurisdiction. But that leaves half of the world, the high seas, that is still the global commons, with every one of us, every human everywhere, with a vested interest and a common stake in what happens in the high seas. You have a voice. What do you want to have happen in the high seas? My voice, I say, let's leave it alone. Let's take half of the world and let that be the blue heart of the planet, the ocean, generating oxygen, taking up carbon dioxide, driving the great ocean food webs, giving back to the coastal zones, being a source of replenishment for what we're taking along the coasts, safeguarding the planet, not just for now, but forever. Okay, half the world is a worthy objective, but right now we have about 3% of the ocean safeguarded for fish and krill and all these protected areas around the world that have been popping up like flowers. Like Chile now has 40% of their exclusive economic zone under protection. This country is kind of lagging behind in spite of the bold efforts made by a small number of presidents, not the present one for sure. But you know, it's a move, it's happening. The UK, looking at their overseas territories around Pitcairn Island and Ascension Island in the Atlantic. Lots of good news, lots of reasons to be optimistic. Kids getting out with masks and fins, and now you're 10 years old, you can put a scuba tank on. Haha. Listen up, 10-year-olds. Go for it. Get acquainted with the jellies. Kids in Hong Kong, that is wildlife central for wildlife trade. But the kids are saying, we are going to protect sharks. We'll never eat shark fin soup. Hong Kong, it's great to see it happening. Kids out at Midway Island, spending their summers going out to retrieve the stuff we have put in the ocean so it won't get stuffed down the goozle of an albatross or get broken into small pieces that come back in the oysters that we eat or the fish that we consume. Kids with t-shirts celebrating Prochlorococcus. Yo-ho! Who knew? You can get a t-shirt too. Areas in the ocean, and they go by many names. Sanctuaries, reserves, marine protected areas, by whatever name they're cause for hope. And the little organization that I started, Mission Blue, doesn't wait for governments to act. We go to the people and say, what part of the planet, what part of the ocean do you want to embrace with care? If you have laws and nobody obeys the law or you don't respect the law, it's just a paper park. We want the people to be convinced that it's important to take care of the ocean, to provide safe havens for fish and lobsters and oysters and that whole zoo of creatures, like old-growth forest or places that we restore to good health. There are about 113 as of last week, have been named and certified by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, a group of volunteer scientists who look at the applications who come in and suggest, yes, this looks like a good idea. You've said why this area matters and what you're going to do to protect it. And we've got this network of hope growing. And anybody, everyone can be a part of it. You don't have to live on the coast to adopt a hope spot around the world. Find out who's doing what and say, yes, I'm in. and work with the government, whether it's on a local or a national or state or a national scale. Just say we need to protect the land, we need to protect the ocean, we need to protect nature, as if our lives depend on it, because they do. Here are two of my favorite hope spots. I have 4 grandsons. These are just 2 of them. But they give me reason for hope. I see the world through their eyes. You can do that too. You can, if you don't have a child of your own, borrow one. Go out to some wild place and listen to what they have to say. Be as curious as a kid is. Ask questions the way kids do. And if you don't have a kid of your own, and if you can't borrow one, just look at yourself in the mirror and remember when you were a kid, and try to recover some of that same sense of anything is possible. Because if we all take that attitude, anything is possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Earle. What a wonderful talk. I want to just take a moment and ask you a quick question. If you were saying to a kid, what's one thing you can do to make a difference? Is there something you might offer just as a quick suggestion, even a couple?
Look in the mirror. Figure out who you are. What do you do well? What do you love? You have power. I mean, no 2 people have the same abilities. I would love to be an opera singer, but I can't. I'm not equipped. But whatever it is, just have confidence that you can and you must make a difference. Use whatever power you've got. There was a little girl in Texas who started picking up the trash on the beach. She didn't ask anybody. Nobody told her to do it. She just did it. And pretty soon people were following along after her, doing the same thing. She became a leader, not because she meant to be, but people saw that she was making a difference. And so, what's your power? Find it, use it.
We sometimes say each of us can give forward, and I think that's what you're talking about doing. Now, I have to say we have a little gift for you, and there are some kids from the Oregon Aquarium. Come on up. They also have some tips that they're going to share with us. So, so come on up. These young people are part of the Aquarium's youth program. Thank you very much. Come on up, kids. I think we're going to ask the question, we're going to make the recommendations first, okay? So we're going to let the kids offer some tips.
Lower your carbon footprint and combat climate change and ocean acidification. By driving and flying less, using less electricity, buying renewable power, and supporting policies that address climate change, we can make a big difference for all life on Earth.
Stop using single-use plastic. Plastic pollution is clogging up waterways and harming marine creatures such as sea turtles, fish, and seabirds. You can start by saying no to plastic straws, bags, utensils, and beverage containers, and by purchasing produce not packaged in plastic. This will send a message to our businesses that single use is abuse.
If you eat seafood, support local, in-season fisheries in the Pacific Northwest, like Dungeness crab, pink shrimp, albacore tuna, and oysters. Overfishing is a huge issue impacting our ocean. By choosing local, in-season fisheries, we reduce our demand for fish supplies and leave more much-needed marine life in the sea. Plus, when we buy local, we reduce the environmental impacts from transporting marine wildlife.
Protect and restore our rivers, lakes, wetlands, and estuaries by eliminating or reducing use of fertilizers and pesticides on your lands. Pollution from fertilizers and pesticides harms our forests, wetlands, waterways, and impacts our oceans. Whether you're 500 miles or 500 feet from the shore, everyone plays a role in caring for our oceans.
Donate to organizations working every day to restore and protect our living oceans. Every dollar counts. Act locally by giving to nonprofits in the Pacific Northwest and globally by giving to nonprofits like Mission Blue. Our oceans are connected and we need all hands on deck.
Most importantly, share your passion and use your voice to inspire others. As Sylvia Earle says, everyone has a power to make a difference, and as an individual or by joining the company of others who share a common goal. The key is in knowing that what you do matters, including doing nothing. Whether you are good with art, words, numbers, or logistics, use your talent to educate others and influence legislators and companies to protect our living oceans.
Now, I understand that you guys have a little something for Dr. Earle. Is that, can you describe? It's a lovely picture. Thank you so much, kids. Now, I have a little something for you as well. And I say little because it is little. You know, we don't really need extra stuff to save, but this says 2019 Visiting Sage, Dr. Sylvia Earle, inspiring us to live a legacy of service and advocacy for younger and future generations. Thank you so much for being here. That's terrific. Now, we are going to have another song, Marion. And let me, before I let you go, I'm going to mention those of you that have tickets to come to the reception, you'll come behind the stage. The rest, enjoy the music, and as you leave, go back through the expo, admire the Washed Ashore exhibit, and see what else is going on. But I must say thanks again to all of you for coming. It means so much to us. Thank you.
I just want to add, please support the aquarium. I mean, I consider aquariums in today's world to be halfway houses for people and fish. You can get acquainted with these creatures from the sea in some place other than on your plate. and the Portland Aquarium really rocks. And they are on a campaign, so give it all you've got.
Thank you. Thanks again. Thank you, folks.